The smoke rose black against the Nevada sky, and Zara Lawson stood frozen in the dirt, watching everything she had worked for turn to ash. The outlaws had come in the night, 6 of them with bandanas covering their faces and cruelty in their eyes, and they had taken what little money she kept hidden in the house, before setting fire to her barn just for the pleasure of destruction. Her horse Copper, the only companion she had known since her father died 2 years prior, lay motionless near the corral fence with a bullet through his chest because he had reared up and nearly trampled one of the men. She was 23 years old, alone on this patch of land outside Goldfield, Nevada in the summer of 1887, and she had nothing left but the small house and the clothes on her back. She did not cry. Her father had taught her that tears were a luxury a woman alone could not afford, so she stood there in her nightdress and boots as the sun came up and turned the smoke golden, and she tried to figure out what she was going to do next. The barn had held her tools, her saddle, the winter hay she had spent all spring cutting and drying. Copper had been more than transportation. He had been her friend, her confidant, the one living thing she spoke to honestly in the long, quiet evenings. Now he was gone, and she would have to drag his body away from the house before the heat made it unbearable. She was still standing there when she heard the sound of hooves on the hard, packed road. Her heart seized with fear that the outlaws had returned, but when she turned she saw a single rider approaching slowly, his hat pulled low against the rising sun. He was leading a pack mule behind him, and as he drew closer she could see he was young, maybe a few years older than herself, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw shadowed with stubble. He pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of her property and looked at the smoking ruin of the barn, then at Copper's body, then at her. "I saw the smoke from the road," he said. His voice was deep and quiet, and there was something careful in the way he spoke, as though he knew how fragile this moment was. "Looks like you had some trouble." "The Fletcher gang," she said flatly. "They came through last night." The man's jaw tightened and he nodded slowly. She had heard of the Fletcher gang. Everyone in this part of Nevada had. They were 6 brothers and a cousin, all of them mean as rattlesnakes and twice as quick. The law had been after them for 2 years, but they knew the desert better than anyone, and they disappeared like ghosts whenever a marshal got close. "I am sorry," the man said, and she believed him. "That is a hard thing." "I will manage," she said, though she had no idea how. The man dismounted and walked toward her, moving slowly so as not to spook her. He was tall and lean, with the build of someone who worked hard for a living, and his clothes were worn but clean. When he got close enough, she could see his eyes were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. "My name is Zachary Hayes," he said. "I am a carpenter by trade, though I have done most everything at one time or another. I was heading north to Virginia City to look for work, but I would be willing to stay here for a while if you need help rebuilding." She stared at him, suspicious and confused. "I cannot pay you." "I did not ask for pay." "Then why would you do it?" He looked at the smoking barn again, then back at her. "Because it needs doing and I can do it. That seems reason enough to me." Zara had learned not to trust easily. Her father had warned her that men would try to take advantage of a woman alone. That kindness often had a price that was not spoken aloud. But there was something in Zachary Hayes' face that made her want to believe him, a steadiness that felt like solid ground beneath uncertain feet. "I have a little food," she said carefully. "Not much, but I can feed you while you work. And there is a lean-to behind the house where you can sleep if you do not mind the mice." "That sounds fair," he said, and he held out his hand. She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm that spoke of years of labor, and something passed between them in that moment, some understanding that neither of them could have put into words. He released her hand and looked at Copper's body. "I will take care of your horse first," he said gently. "You should not have to do that yourself." She wanted to argue, to tell him she could handle it, but the relief that washed over her was so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. She nodded and turned away, heading back toward the house before he could see the tears that finally came. Zachary spent that first day digging a grave for Copper in the shade of the cottonwood trees near the creek. The ground was hard and rocky, and the work was brutal in the July heat, but he did not complain or stop until the hole was deep enough. He fashioned a drag from some old lumber and used his mule to pull the horse's body to the grave, and then he filled it in and marked it with a cairn of stones. Zara watched from the porch, and when he was finished, she walked out to the grave and stood there for a long time with her hand on the stones. Zachary gave her privacy and went to examine what was left of the barn. That evening she cooked beans and cornbread, and they ate together at the small table in her kitchen. The house was neat but sparse, just the kitchen and one bedroom and a main room with a fireplace. There were books on a shelf which surprised him, and a violin hanging on the wall that looked like it had not been played in some time. "Your father's?" he asked, nodding at the violin. "Mine," she said. "He taught me to play when I was small. I have not had much reason to since he passed." "I am sorry for your loss," she nodded, studying him across the table. "Where are you from originally?" "Kansas. My family had a farm outside Lawrence, but it was destroyed during the war. My parents died of fever a few years after, and I have been moving west ever since, working where I can find it." "You have no family left?" "A sister in Missouri, married to a banker. She has her own life now." He paused. "What about you? Is it just you out here?" "Just me. My father won a land claim in a card game 15 years ago, and we came out here to make something of it. He died of a heart condition 2 winters back. I have been managing on my own since then." "That must be lonely." She met his eyes. "It is. But lonely is better than dead, which is what I would be if I had tried to fight those men last night." He nodded slowly. "You are smart to have stayed back. The Fletcher gang has killed before, and they will kill again. You seem to know a lot about them." "I hear things. I was in Tonopah a month ago, and they robbed the stage station there. Shot the station master in the leg just because he took too long opening the safe." Zachary pushed his plate away. "Men like that are poison. They ruin everything they touch." After dinner, Zachary excused himself to the lean-to. It was barely large enough for a bedroll and his pack, but he had slept in worse places. As he lay there in the darkness listening to the coyotes call to each other across the desert, he thought about the woman in the house. She was beautiful in a fierce, unadorned way, with long dark hair she wore in a braid and eyes the color of whiskey. But it was not her beauty that had made him stop. It was the way she had stood there in front of that burning barn with her spine straight and her chin up, refusing to break even though her world was falling apart around her. He had seen that kind of strength before, in his mother after the farm burned, in his sister when their parents died. It was the strength of women who had no choice but to endure, and it moved something deep in his chest. The next morning, Zachary began the work of rebuilding. He rode into Goldfield with a list Zara had made of the tools she had lost, and he spent some of the money he had saved to replace what he could. The town was bustling with miners and prospectors, all of them chasing rumors of gold and silver in the surrounding hills. He bought lumber from the sawmill and nails from the general store, and he listened to the gossip in the saloon about the Fletcher gang's latest movements. They had been spotted near Beatty 2 days ago, which meant they were moving south toward California. Good riddance, he thought. When he returned to the property, he found Zara working in her vegetable garden, which had somehow survived the night's destruction. She looked up as he approached, shading her eyes against the sun. "You bought lumber," she said, looking at the loaded mule. "I did. I will keep track of what I spend, and you can pay me back when you are able. No interest." She stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Mr. Hayes, I do not know when I will be able to pay you back. It could be years. Then it will be years. I am not worried about it." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to puzzle him out, trying to understand his motives. He did not blame her. In his experience, people usually wanted something, even when they pretended otherwise. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. He thought about lying, about giving her some easy answer that would satisfy her questions. But something about her directness deserved the same in return. "Because when I was 12 years old, bushwhackers burned our farm in Kansas," he said. "They killed our livestock and destroyed everything we had built. We would have starved that winter if our neighbors had not helped us rebuild. My father always said that debt could never be repaid except by helping someone else when they needed it. So that is what I am doing. I am paying forward the kindness that kept my family alive." Zara's expression softened, and she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, and this time she meant it without reservation. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Zachary worked on the barn from sunup until the heat became too intense in the afternoon, then rested in the shade and resumed in the evening. Zara tended her garden and the chickens she had managed to keep hidden from the outlaws, and she cooked meals that were simple but filling. They ate together twice a day and talked about small things at first, the weather and the work and the little dramas of Goldfield. But gradually, the conversations grew deeper and more personal. She told him about her childhood in Sacramento, before her mother died of cholera, about the journey to Nevada in a covered wagon when she was 8 years old, about learning to shoot and ride and rope from her father. He told her about growing up during the war, about watching Lawrence burn during Quantrill's raid, about the years of hunger and rebuilding that followed. They discovered they had both read the same books, that they both loved thunderstorms and hated the taste of liver, that they both dreamed of something more than mere survival. Zara found herself watching him as he worked, admiring the way his muscles moved under his shirt as he lifted beams into place, the concentration on his face as he measured and cut boards. He was patient and meticulous, taking pride in doing the work properly even though no one would pay him for it. She had known plenty of men who were quick with their fists or their guns, but few who were skilled with their hands in the way Zachary was. There was something deeply attractive about his competence, his quiet confidence in his own abilities. Zachary, for his part, found himself inventing excuses to be near the house during the day. He would need a drink of water from the well, or he would want to show Zara his progress, or he would offer to help with some heavy lifting in the garden. The truth was that he loved hearing her voice, loved the way she laughed at his dry observations about the chickens, or the way she argued with him about politics and religion and philosophy. She was intelligent and opinionated and utterly without pretense, and he had never met anyone quite like her. One evening in early August, after a particularly hot day, they sat together on the porch and watched the sun set over the distant mountains. The barn was half finished, its skeleton standing dark against the orange sky. Zara had brought out glasses of cool water from the well, and they drank in comfortable silence. "I have been thinking," she said after a while, "that I need a new horse. I cannot keep asking you to ride into town for supplies on my behalf." "I do not mind," he said. "I know you do not. But I need one anyway. I cannot run this place without one. There is a horse auction in Goldfield next Saturday. We could go together and see what they have," She looked at him. "We, if you want company, or you can go alone. I just thought it might be helpful to have another set of eyes looking at the horses." The thought of spending a day in town with Zachary made her heart beat faster, which was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, not a schoolgirl with a crush. But she could not deny that she had begun to feel something for him, something that went beyond gratitude or friendship. "I would like that," she said. "Thank you." The following Saturday, they rode into Goldfield together on Zachary's horse, with Zara sitting behind him and her arms around his waist. She tried not to think about how good it felt to be close to him, to feel the warmth of his body through his shirt. The auction was held in a corral near the center of town, and there were perhaps 30 horses being sold, everything from old plow horses to wild mustangs fresh off the range. They walked along the fence together, studying each animal carefully. Zachary pointed out conformation flaws and signs of poor temperament, and Zara was impressed by his knowledge. When they reached a bay mare near the end of the line, Zara stopped. "Her," she said. The mare was young, maybe 4 years old, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor despite the chaos of the auction. Zachary examined her carefully, checking her teeth and legs and hooves. "She is a good one," he said finally. "Sound and healthy, well trained from the look of her. She will not be cheap. How much do you think? $40 at least, maybe 50. Zara's heart sank. She had $23 saved, money she had scraped together over 2 years from selling eggs and vegetables in town. It was nowhere near enough. Zachary saw her expression and understood immediately. "I can lend you the rest," he said quietly. "I am already in debt to you for the lumber and tools. Then you will be in debt to me for a little more. It is not a problem, Zara." She wanted to argue, but she also knew she needed that horse. "All right," she said finally. "But I am keeping track of every penny I owe you, and I will pay you back. I know you will." When the mare came up for auction, Zachary did the bidding while Zara stood beside him and tried not to show how anxious she was. The price climbed quickly, $40, then $45, then $50. 2 other men were bidding against them, a rancher from Tonopah and a man she did not recognize. At $55, the rancher dropped out, but the other man kept going. $60, $65, $70. Zachary hesitated, and Zara put her hand on his arm. "Stop," she whispered. "It is too much." But he looked at her face and saw how much she wanted that horse, and he raised his hand one more time. $75. The other man scowled and shook his head, and the auctioneer brought down his hammer. "Sold to the young man in the blue shirt." Zara felt dizzy with a mixture of joy and guilt. $75 was a fortune, more than most people in Goldfield earned in 3 months. Zachary paid the auctioneer with money from his leather wallet, and she saw how thin the wallet was afterward. He had just spent nearly everything he had on a horse for her. "Zachary, I cannot accept this," she said as they led the mare away from the corral. "That was all your money. You were saving that to start over in Virginia City. I still have a little left, and I can always earn more. Besides, I am not in any hurry to leave." He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I like it here. At my rundown property with no pay and mice in the lean-to." "With you," he said simply. They stared at each other for a long moment, the noise of the auction fading into the background. Zara felt something shift inside her, some wall she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. This man had given her everything, asked for nothing in return, and now he was standing here telling her that her company was worth more to him than money or comfort or plans for the future. "I like having you here too," she said quietly. They rode back to the property with Zara on the new mare, whom she decided to name Sage for the color of her eyes. Zachary rode beside her on his own horse, and they talked easily about nothing in particular. But there was a new awareness between them now, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily all summer. That evening, after dinner, Zara took down her violin from the wall. She tuned it carefully, wincing at how rusty her fingers were, and then she began to play. It was a simple tune her father had taught her, a Scottish ballad about lost love and longing, and she played it slowly, feeling her way back into the music. When she finished, she looked up to find Zachary watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "That was beautiful," he said. "I am out of practice. Play another." She played for an hour, working through all the songs she remembered, and Zachary sat and listened without speaking. When she finally put the violin away, he stood and stretched. "I should let you get some rest," he said, but Zara did not want him to leave. She wanted him to stay here in the warm lamplight, wanted to keep talking to him until the sun came up. Instead, she said, "Good night, Zachary," and watched him walk out into the darkness. The barn was nearly finished by the end of August. Zachary had built it better than the original, with stronger joints and a higher roof and proper ventilation. He had even fashioned new stalls and a tack room, working late into the evenings by lamplight. Zara helped when she could, handing him tools and holding boards in place, and they worked side by side in companionable silence. On the day he hung the final door, they stood back and admired his work together. The barn was beautiful in its simplicity, all clean lines and honest craftsmanship. Zara felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude and something deeper she was afraid to name. "It is perfect," she said. "It is sturdy anyway. It should last you a good long while. Zachary, I do not know how to thank you. You have given me everything, and I have given you nothing in return." He turned to face her, and she could see the emotion in his eyes. "You have given me more than you know. These past 2 months have been the happiest I have had in years. I wake up every morning knowing I have a purpose, knowing that what I do matters to someone. That is worth more than any amount of money. But you are still sleeping in a lean-to full of mice," he laughed. "The mice are not so bad once you get used to them." She took a step closer to him, her heart pounding. "You could sleep in the house. I have a spare room, or rather, I have a main room with a decent couch. It would be more comfortable than that lean-to. Zara, I do not want to compromise your reputation. People in town already talk, seeing me out here. Let them talk. I am tired of living my life worried about what other people think." She reached out and took his hand. "Stay, please." He looked down at their joined hands, and then he raised her fingers to his lips and kissed them gently. "All right," he said. "I will stay." That night, Zachary moved his few belongings into the house and made up a bed on the couch. It was strange having someone else in the house after so long alone, but it was a good kind of strange. They sat together by the fire, even though the evening was warm, talking about their plans for the property. Zara wanted to expand the garden, maybe get a few head of cattle if she could save enough money. Zachary thought they could dig a better irrigation system, channel water from the creek to make the land more productive. "We," she said, catching the pronoun. He looked embarrassed. "I am sorry. I should not assume I will still be here. You did not hire me for the long term." "You did not hire yourself at all. You just showed up and started helping." She paused. "But I would like you to stay. For as long as you want. This place is too big for one person, and I could use a partner. A partner in the ranching. We could split the profits, build something together. If you are interested." Zachary's expression was unreadable. "I am interested, but I need to know what kind of partnership you are thinking about." Zara felt her face flush. This was the moment, she realized, the point where she had to be brave or risk losing something precious. "The ranching kind," she said, And maybe eventually the other kind if you were agreeable. The other kind, the kind where we are not just business partners. She was fumbling this terribly, she knew, but she pressed on. I care about you, Zachary. More than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. And I think you might care about me too. If I am wrong, please tell me now before I embarrass myself further. He crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands. You are not wrong, he said, and then he kissed her. It was a gentle kiss at first, tentative and questioning, but when she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, it deepened into something more passionate. She had been kissed before, by a boy in Sacramento when she was 16, but this was nothing like that clumsy fumbling. This was heat and hunger and a feeling of rightness, as though she had been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Zachary rested his forehead against hers and laughed softly. I have wanted to do that since the day I met you, he said. You should have done it sooner. I did not want to presume. You had been through so much, and I did not want you to think I had helped you because I expected something in return. I never thought that. You are not that kind of man. She kissed him again, softer this time. But I am glad you finally got around to it. They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing and making plans. Zachary told her about his dreams of having land of his own, of building something that would last, and that he could be proud of. Zara told him about her fear of being alone, about the nightmares she still had of the night the outlaws came. He held her close and promised that she would never be alone again, that he would stay as long as she wanted him. I want you forever, she said. Then forever is what you will get. The next few months passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. They expanded the garden, repaired the irrigation system, and bought 3 head of cattle from a rancher who was selling out and moving east. Zachary proved to be as skilled with animals as he was with carpentry, and the cattle thrived under his care. Zara taught him the intricacies of chicken husbandry and how to coax more vegetables from the stubborn Nevada soil. They worked side by side every day, and every night they sat together by the fire and talked about everything and nothing. In October, Zachary rode into Goldfield and came back with a small velvet box. He waited until after dinner, until they were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out, and then he got down on one knee. Zara Lawson, you are the strongest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. These past 4 months with you have been the best of my life, and I cannot imagine spending the rest of my days with anyone else. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? She was crying and laughing at the same time, nodding before he even finished the question. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The ring was simple, just a thin gold band with a small diamond, but she loved it more than anything she had ever owned. He slipped it onto her finger and then stood and kissed her, and she felt a completeness she had never known before. They were married in November in a small ceremony at the church in Goldfield. There were only a handful of people in attendance, a few neighbors from nearby properties and the minister's wife who insisted on playing the piano. Zara wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Zachary wore his best shirt and trousers. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her so thoroughly that the minister's wife blushed and looked away. The winter was cold, but they kept each other warm. They moved Zachary's things into Zara's bedroom and made it theirs, hanging his few clothes next to hers in the wardrobe and arranging their books together on the shelf. They learned the rhythms of living together, the small compromises and accommodations that make a marriage work. He learned that she was grumpy before her first cup of coffee in the morning and that she liked to read in bed before sleeping. She learned that he hummed while he worked and that he had a terrible singing voice but loved to sing anyway. In the spring, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary over breakfast one morning, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His eyes went wide and then filled with tears, and he came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Are you sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be. I am about 3 months along, I think." 3 months? Why did you not tell me sooner? I wanted to be certain before I got your hopes up. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "This is the best news I have ever received. You are going to be a wonderful mother. And you are going to be a wonderful father." They spent the next 6 months preparing for the baby's arrival. Zachary built a cradle from pine wood, and Zara sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They argued good-naturedly about names, finally settling on James if it was a boy and Rose if it was a girl. The pregnancy was not easy. Zara was sick most mornings, and the heat of the summer made her uncomfortable. But Zachary was endlessly patient, bringing her cool cloths and ginger tea and rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. In late October, nearly a year to the day after Zachary had proposed, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zachary was terrified he would lose her, but Zara was strong and the midwife from Goldfield was skilled. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he wept with relief. "You have a son," the midwife said, placing the tiny, squalling infant in Zara's arms. Zara looked down at the baby, at his shock of dark hair and his scrunched-up red face, and she fell instantly and completely in love. "Hello, James," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Zachary sat beside her on the bed and put his arm around her shoulders, looking down at their son with wonder. "He is perfect. He is loud. He gets that from you." She elbowed him gently, and he laughed. And then they both just stared at the baby, marveling at the fact that they had created this perfect tiny human together. Life with a baby was exhausting and chaotic and more wonderful than either of them could have imagined. James was a good baby overall, sleeping reasonably well and eating enthusiastically. Zara nursed him while Zachary took over more of the outdoor work, and they traded off the household tasks as needed. Zachary proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby even when he was fussy. He would walk James around the property for hours, pointing out the chickens and the cattle and the mountains in the distance, talking to him as though he could understand every word. By the time James was 6 months old, the ranch was thriving. They had expanded their herd to 10 head of cattle and had sold enough produce in Goldfield to pay off all of Zara's debts to Zachary and even save a little money. They hired a young man from town to help with the heavy work, which gave them more time to spend as a family. One evening in early summer, as they sat on the porch watching James crawl around on a blanket, Zara turned to Zachary and smiled. "You remember the day we met, of course. You were standing in front of your burning barn looking like you wanted to fight the whole world." "I did want to fight the whole world. I was so angry and so scared, and then this stranger rode up and offered to help for no reason at all. I had a reason. Paying forward a kindness, I remember, but it was more than that for you, was it not? You could have helped rebuild the barn and then moved on, but you stayed." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I stayed because I fell in love with you. It happened so fast I barely realized it was happening. One day I was thinking about how to frame the barn walls, and the next I was thinking about how to make you smile. By the time the barn was finished, I knew I could not leave. I fell in love with you too. I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude, that I was confusing appreciation with affection. But every time you did something kind, every time you made me laugh or listened to me talk about my father or played with the chickens to amuse me, I fell a little deeper. And now look at us." married with a baby and a thriving ranch. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it is real. It is real. We made it real together. She looked out at the property, at the sturdy barn Zachary had built and the garden they had expanded and the cattle grazing in the distance. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you. That is not true. You would have survived without me. You are the strongest person I know. Maybe I would have survived, but I would not have thrived. I would not have this. She gestured at the ranch, at their son, at the life they had built. You gave me a second chance when I thought everything was over. You rebuilt more than just the barn, Zachary. You rebuilt my whole life. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. We rebuilt it together. And we are going to keep building it day by day, year by year, until we are old and gray and our grandchildren are running around this ranch. Grandchildren, we have to get through raising this one first. We will have more, he said confidently. At least 2 or 3 more. I want this house full of noise and laughter and chaos, she laughed. 2 or 3 more. You are ambitious. I spent too many years alone. I want a big family, people around me all the time. Unless you do not want that. I want that, she said softly. I want everything with you. The years passed gently after that. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Sarah when James was 2, and another son they named Thomas when Sarah was 3. The house was indeed full of noise and laughter and chaos, and Zachary thrived in the middle of it all. He was an involved father, teaching the children to ride and rope and build things with their hands. Zara taught them to read and play music and tend the garden. Together, they created a home that was warm and loving and safe. The ranch grew steadily. They expanded their herd to 50 head of cattle and bought more land from a neighbor who wanted to retire. Zachary built an addition onto the house to accommodate the growing family, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They hired more help and became one of the more prosperous ranches in the area. But prosperity did not change them. They still worked hard every day, still sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set, still made time for each other despite the demands of children and ranch work. Their love deepened and matured, weathering the small storms of everyday life and emerging stronger each time. When James was 10 years old, he asked his mother about the barn. "Papa built this, did he not?" "He did." "But why? You said he was a stranger when he showed up." Zara smiled and pulled her son close. "He was a stranger who became the most important person in my life. Sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Like when the Outlaws burned the old barn. Exactly like that. Something terrible happened, and something wonderful came from it. Your father rebuilt the barn and he never asked for pay, and that act of kindness changed both of our lives. I am glad the Outlaws burned the barn then. I am not glad they did that. They also shot my horse Copper, and that was a terrible thing. But I am glad your father found me when he did. I am glad he was the kind of man who would stop to help a stranger, and I am glad I was smart enough to let him." James thought about this for a moment. "When I grow up, I want to be like Papa. Then you will be a very good man indeed." The children grew and the ranch prospered, and Zara and Zachary grew old together. They celebrated 25 years of marriage surrounded by their children and grandchildren, a rowdy gathering that filled the house to bursting. Zachary made a speech that made everyone cry, talking about the day he saw the smoke rising from a barn and made the decision to stop and help. He talked about how that single choice had led to everything good in his life, and how grateful he was every single day that Zara had trusted him enough to let him stay. Zara stood up after him and said, "My husband likes to say he rebuilt my barn and gave me a new horse and never asked for pay. But that is not quite true. He did ask for pay in his way. He asked for my trust and then my friendship and then my love. and I gave him all three freely because he earned them with every nail he hammered, and every board he cut, and every kind word he spoke. He rebuilt my barn, yes. But more importantly, he rebuilt my faith in people, in kindness, in the possibility of happiness. And that is worth more than all the money in the world. Everyone applauded, and Zachary pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and their grandchildren giggled and made faces while their own children smiled knowingly at each other. On their 30th anniversary, Zachary took Zara back to the spot where the old barn had stood. The new barn was still standing strong, a testament to his craftsmanship and their shared determination to build something lasting. They stood there hand in hand, looking at the structure that had brought them together. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had just ridden past that day?" Zachary asked. "Sometimes. I think I would have survived somehow. I am stubborn enough. But I would not have lived, not really. You gave me a reason to do more than just survive. You gave me the same thing. I was drifting before I met you, going from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to wake up every morning. We gave each other everything," she said. "We did." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I would do it all again, you know. Even knowing how hard it would be sometimes. Even knowing about the droughts and the sick cattle and the times money was tight. I would stop at that burning barn every single time because it led me to you. And I would trust that strange cowboy who showed up out of nowhere every single time, because he turned out to be the best man I ever knew." They kissed there in the shadow of the barn. Two people who had started with nothing but ashes and loss, and had built a life full of love and laughter and meaning. The sun set behind them, painting the Nevada sky in shades of gold and orange and red, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied and cattle lowed and children played. It was a good life, they both thought. It was a life worth fighting for, worth building, worth sharing. And it had all started with one act of kindness, one stranger who had stopped to help, and one woman who had been brave enough to accept that help and see where it led. As they walked back to the house together, Zara leaned her head on Zachary's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For everything. For stopping that day, for rebuilding the barn, for giving me Sage, for staying, for loving me, for all of it. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a dusty stranger with nothing but good intentions and a mule. Thank you for building this life with me." They reached the porch and sat down in the chairs they had occupied thousands of times over the years, watching the stars come out one by one. Inside the house, they could hear their youngest daughter playing piano, the same songs Zara had taught her on the same violin that now hung on Sarah's wall. Their sons were in town with their own families, but would be back tomorrow for Sunday dinner, a tradition Zara had insisted on from the moment James was old enough to sit at the table. "I love you," Zachary said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing in front of that burning barn, and I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." "I love you too," Zara said. "My cowboy who rebuilt my barn and my life and never asked for a single thing in return except the chance to stay by my side. Best deal I ever made. Best deal we ever made." They sat there in the darkness, holding hands and watching the stars, two souls who had found each other in the aftermath of destruction and had built something beautiful from the ashes. The barn stood solid and strong behind them, a monument to Zachary's skill and his love. Sage's descendants grazed in the pasture beside it, testament to his generosity and faith in their shared future. And the house was full of the family they had created together, proof that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places. The outlaws who had burned Zara's barn and shot her horse dead had meant to destroy her. Instead, they had set in motion a chain of events that led to more happiness than she had ever imagined possible. And the cowboy who had stopped to help, who had rebuilt everything she lost and never asked for pay, had found his home and his purpose in the woman who had trusted him enough to let him stay. It was a love story for the ages, born in fire and destruction, and rebuilt with care and patience and unwavering devotion. It was a story they would tell their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a story that would live on long after they were gone. It was a story about kindness and second chances and the healing power of love. And it was their story, forged in the wild Nevada desert in the summer of 1887, when a woman who had lost everything met a man who had nothing to give except his heart and his hands and his promise to stay. Together they had built a life, a family, a legacy that would endure for generations. As the night deepened around them and the desert air cooled, Zara and Zachary sat together in perfect contentment, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together as they always had. The barn stood strong. The ranch prospered. The family thrived. And their love, tested by time and proven by years of devotion, endured as solid and unshakable as the mountains that surrounded their home. It was everything they had ever wanted, and more than they had ever dared to dream. And it had all begun with one simple act of kindness from a stranger who became the love of her life.